Chamorro people have been around for about 4,000 years. In the past centuries, our island has been occupied by the Spanish, Americans, and Japanese. After the recapturing of Guam by the United States in 1944, the Chamorro people developed desires for self-government. A big achievement in this journey was the signing of the Organic Act on August 1, 1950. This federal law provided for a civil government appointed by the U.S. and upheld the Insular Cases of 1901, stating that Guam does not necessarily fall under the U.S. Constitution, falls under plenary powers of the U.S. Congress, and is classified as an unincorporated territory. Although this was a huge achievement for Guam, the Organic Act generated some issues, including the validation of the taking of land for military use without compensation and the influx of immigration after World War II. Since then, Guam has had 2 constitutional conventions in the 1970s and 80s, but reached an impasse after Congress denied their revised constitution and was told that they had to remain within the existing territorial-federal relationship. The quest for self-determination continues as American policies continue to inhibit Guam's government and growth.
Guam can achieve what is known as a full measure of self-government. Guam will be in a position to determine one of 3 options that will be presented to the voters, and it would be opportunity for either achieving full rights and full political rights, either through one of those 3 options that are available.
The self-determination movement on Guam was also affected by the growing population and diversity. The population of Guam in 1950 was about 59,000. In 1940, the population consisted of 91% Chamorros. In 1960, about 51% of the population considered themselves Chamorro. By 1980, that population almost doubled, reaching about 104,000, and only 43% of that population considered themselves Chamorro. By 2000, just 37% of the population considered themselves Chamorro. Due to the rising different populations on Guam and the strength of the self-determination movement, a big issue has been created regarding the self and self-determination, drawing lines between Chamorros and Guamanians. Chamorro refers to a member of the native people of the Mariana Islands. Guamanian refers to one who lives on Guam. It's easy to jump to the conclusion that the vote is based on race. The media has fabricated this racial idea greatly. In actuality, Guam's self-determination concerns any citizen on Guam before the island was colonized by America when the Organic Act was signed, whether or not they were Chamorro by blood. More recently, a key figure in the fight for the Guamanian vote is Arnold Dave Davis, who is a columnist for the Marianas Variety on Guam. He is a former Air Force officer and has lived on Guam since 1977. He filed a lawsuit challenging a race-exclusive plebiscite due to him being rejected from registering for the vote. Many of the current legislatures stand by the native inhabitants regarding the issue. Many believe it should be dismissed.
1946, when the United States signed the charter, the United States Charter, in which all colonies or territories, self-governing territories, which have been committed to be protected in their God-given right, inalienable right. That was what was committed.
Well, it's difficult to say who I believe it should be. It's a question of people who are contesting this in court, and we will determine what the court will say about that kind of electorate that is being that will be used in terms of the referendum.
First of all, the idea and the conception and creation of quote-unquote a Chamorro vote is a conception that was fabricated by the media. And so if you look at the public law, there's no reference to a Chamorro vote anywhere. If you look at the United States list of non-self-governing territories, of which Guam is one of 16, there is no reference to Chamorro in that context. And so if you also look at the United Nations Resolution 1541, in addition to 1514, which defines self-determination and the right, it's described as a an inalienable human right of Native peoples who have experienced colonization. And so by that definition, it specifically says that this fundamental human right should be afforded to Native inhabitants. So if you look in the case of Guam, if I were to ask anyone on Guam, who are the native inhabitants of Guam, their answer would be Chamorro people. So in my mind, it's a very clear, very simple way to answer this question that you pose. Now, as you know, this has become perhaps the most critical question of the hour with regards to who is allowed to participate in the vote. And it's prescribed, of course, by the local public law. And our current local public law defines the native inhabitants as those who became citizens by virtue of the Organic Act in 1950. And so with that, I think it's actually a very sort of generous definition of who the native inhabitants are, because if you consider the fact that the Chamorro people have been in these islands for, in the ballpark of 4,000 years, and you're limiting this definition to 1950, so the last 70 or so years, that's actually a very generous negotiation already in terms of who's defined as native inhabitant. So if I were to then take that and put it into answering your question, I clearly think that the current definition of native inhabitants in the existing law is fitting.
Most of those that have come here, although they have become, citizens of Guam now, have had the inalienable rights from where they came from. If you have come from the Philippines, you've got it when you were in the Philippines.
Today, Chamorro activists stand strong, because as time goes on, Guam continues to grow in diversity and opinions. Indeed, the road towards self-determination is a long and winding one, but someday soon, perhaps we'll encounter the long-awaited plebiscites and future decisions of our political leaders.